Okay, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to GameMaker Studio 2.3 things. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. I've been kind of distracted by shaders and 3D stuff and tower defense things for the last few weeks, but there are still more things to talk about in the GameMaker Studio 2.3 update, so I will be getting to that. This is Inheritance, which I'm going to be talking about today. Before I get into that, let me make the icons here a little bit bigger in the asset browser. This is more or less the same project as I had in the last 2.3 video, except I've just taken out all of the unused things. I've taken out the things that were still there from the earlier versions of the project. And while I'm at it, I will make note of that in source control. So the last thing I was doing was methods, struct methods, and if I make that a little bit full screen here, I had the animal, and it's got some values. It's got some HP. It's got time. It's got a step method and a draw method. Where is it? Oh, I was gonna say where is its heal method, because it's calling that somewhere. I could read my code. Today we'll be extending this with Inheritance. You may have heard of Inheritance before. It was a thing in previous GameMaker, in old GameMaker, and classic GameMaker, as I often call it for some reason. You could use it with GameMaker objects of old. You could assign parents to an object, and then that object would inherit methods and would be included in things like collision checks for that type of object. You can do this in 2.3 as well with Structs. So if I were to actually create a doggo, actually, you know what? First, I'm going to add another method that is method speak, and I'm going to give it a method that I'm going to give it a method for speaking, or it's not really going to speak. It's just going to show a message, and let's say show message. What would a generic animal voice line be? Something like, ah. Very descriptive. Are we good? We're good. And I will invoke that method somewhere. So let's say instead of healing, let us call method speak instead when you hit a key on the keyboard. And when you hit the space bar, it's going to let out a mighty roar. That's cool. You see how that's going on. You see what's happening there. But apparently I've named the instance of new animal that I created in the last video a doggo, and because doggos are just the objectively superior type of animal, I'm going to be continuing down that road. Let's see. Function doggo is going to take a... Alright, let's give it an X and Y as well. And okay, so up here, when I made this original video, I prefixed the parameters to the function with, to the constructor with an underscore. The reason that you used to kind of have to do that was a bug, which I don't believe is the case anymore, but just to keep things consistent, I will be doing it again. Inheritance. So we want the doggo to inherit from animal in the object hierarchy. Some computer languages do this differently from others. If you've ever taken a computer science class in school, you've probably used Java. I don't know if Java is still as popular in schools as it was 10 years ago, but regardless, you've probably seen it. Java uses the extends keyword to denote that an object class inherits from something else. If you've ever used one of the C-like languages, C++, C#, something like that, you might have seen a colon used instead. If you've used Unity in the past, you've most likely used C#. GML uses the colon, much like the C languages. So we are going to have doggo extend animal. Let me just add those curly braces. I don't know how inheritance in every single programming language ever works, but GML does deviate a little bit from the ones that I'm familiar with. Most programming languages that I know would have you simply extend the type in the constructor definition, in the class definition, And then in the constructor, you would have to do something like super with any parameters that you want to pass it, which in my case would be x and y, since the animal constructor takes an x and a y. In GML, you do not do that. Instead, you implicitly call the base constructor before you do anything else by attaching the parentheses to the class that you're inheriting from. So animal, and then x, and then I hit the insert key, y, like that. So now you don't have to do anything else. You could say, what is it complaining about now? I need to, of course. It used to kind of let you get away with not doing that, with forgetting to add the constructor keyword, and it would still work. And then a couple versions ago, they cracked down on that, so that you now have to specify that a function is a constructor. Otherwise, it will cause an error if you try to use the new keyword on it, which led to some annoying bugs that I had to fix and some other things. Anyway, now instead of saying new animal, I can say doggo equals new doggo. I'm going to have so much fun describing my code in this video. So let's run the game. And this is going to do exactly what it did before. You see you have a circular circle that is moving in a circle around the screen, and it has 11 HP. And I can hit the spacebar and it screams. And if I were to uncomment, I hit the insert key again. If I were to uncomment the heal method and comment out the speak method, instead of screaming, I would have my HP go up. So you can see everything that animal did, doggo now does. You're inheriting all of these variables. You're inheriting all of the methods. Any functionality that was built into animal now also applies to doggo. So as you can imagine, you can extend this. Let me start with the speak method that I defined in the method step. So instead of saying method speak equals whatever I was doing before, I will make that a function and we can speak in dog language instead. So now when I hit the space bar, we're going to still have our HP incremented because I had accidentally not uncommented that like I meant to. All right, take two. Now when we hit the space bar, we will go woof instead of just blood curdling screaming, and everything else has stayed the same. And you can do whatever you want with this. This is an overridden method. In the animal class, the speak method has it contains a function that shows a message of ah, and down here in the doggo class, it now contains a function that says a much more happy sounding woof. Let's see, if you wanted to, you could also override anything else that you want. You could override the draw method. And let's say instead of drawing a circle, draw a rectangle, and let's instead of a radius of 32, we'll have a side length of 32. Like that, and it will be a full rectangle instead of just an outline. And just I guess I've kind of accidentally committed to this when I mistyped the function name. We're gonna be Clifford the Big Red Dog. Does anyone even remember that? Hang on a minute. The show is still running? What is my life? Anyway, here we go. Instead of drawing a circle, we are going to be drawing a square. And that's our dog. You can do it with variables too, or I should say you can do it with regular variables instead of variables containing functions, which is really all that methods are, because even now that they've given us real, in massive air quotes, object-oriented programming, it's still kind of not really object-oriented programming. Let's see, I can say HP equals, what's a number? I'll give you 5 HP. The first number I thought of. So now we have 5 HP instead of whatever value we had before. And you can imagine all sorts of uses for this. if you wanted to go a little bit farther, let's in the is it in the step event where the position is determined? Do I feel like overriding the step event also? I don't really. These examples here should be enough. So what's happening here, as I mentioned, is this code inside the animal constructor is being called before the first line of the doggo constructor. So by this point where all those comment slashes are, some amount of code has already run in the animal constructor, and everything inside the animal constructor has already been initialized. So the X position, the Y position, the time variable, which I don't believe is actually used. Oh, yes, it is. The step method, speak method, draw method, damage method, and so on and so forth. And if you want to, you can, like I've said a little while ago, those variables already exist. You can use them. If you wanted to show message, the current HP total, which I believe was 11, because you started out with 1 and then like healed 10 down at the bottom of the constructor. Your HP is currently 11, and then it just gets set to 5 on the first line of the doggo constructor. This is something you may want to be careful of. It would not be impossible, or probably it would not even be difficult to accidentally create a memory leak. For example, if you created a data structure or something, such as that, and if you came down to the, I'm gonna get rid of this. If you came down to the doggo constructor and you did it again, this would give you a memory leak. You have created a reference to a DS map up here in the animal constructor, and then you removed that reference to that DS map in the doggo constructor when you reassigned another value to it, and there's nothing pointing to this data structure anymore, but it's still there. It's going to just be taking up memory. It's going to be a memory leak. Be careful with stuff like that. Data structures and structs in general are a bit of are something you generally need to be careful of. This is really a subject for another video entirely, but structs in GameMaker are garbage collected, as in they will be removed automatically if there's nothing referencing them. But data structures, as of my recording this in July of 2020, will not. It would be kind of nice if Yo-Yo Games added that in the future, garbage collection for data structures, but I have a feeling that's a long way off. Anyway, what else is there to talk about with inheritance? So if you wanted to, you could go even farther with this. Let's create a what's a nice breed of a doggo? I really like beagles. We're gonna create a class for a beagle. Anyway, beagle extends doggo. It takes the original arguments for the constructor. If you want to. What kind of barks do beagles even do? I've never actually like had one. I'm just gonna go with that. That's rather generic, but I am not a doggo specialist, unfortunately, as much as I would like to be one. So I can press the space bar, and that's going to actually be a regular generic doggo, because that's what I told it to instantiate. Good job, me. Take 2. Again, we're gonna hit the space bar. I'm just gonna go bark, bark. So you can see this will go as deep as you want. This was early in the GML 2.3 beta. This was kind of broken. If you had too many levels of inheritance, sometimes variables wouldn't exist when they should. Sometimes, like, methods would refer to the wrong object and some other annoying things. As far as I know, all those issues have been fixed. But if you decide for some reason to create an inheritance tree that's like 7 levels deep, 2 things about that. 1, people are going to make fun of you because game devs are mean. And 2, again, as of my recording this in July of 2020, this is still in beta. And if you do encounter any issues with struct inheritance or anything, you should probably report that, as you would with any other bug that you find in this beta. I guess that's worth talking about. There's a bit of a there's a couple things about inheritance There are a few limitations that GML specifically has. There's a few general, you might want to call them debates about how to use inheritance. It's generally recommended that you don't go too deep in inheritance hierarchies. There's a principle called composition over inheritance, and that doesn't exactly translate well into GameMaker. GameMaker does not currently have support for programming interfaces the way that other object-oriented languages do. I believe the generally accepted rule of thumb is that you shouldn't go deeper than 2 or 3 levels of inheritance. So, for example, you can extend Beagle here if you want. You could make something like Beagle Puppy or whatever, but you probably shouldn't. For one, there is a performance cost associated with inheritance for a couple of reasons, which I won't get into right now. If you're just going 1 or honestly probably 2 levels deep in inheritance, you should be fine. This is GameMaker language. It is not the fastest language in the world. A single level of inheritance is probably not going to be your performance bottleneck. And more immediately, there's also the problem that if you have a million levels of inheritance, it's going to be hard for you as the programmer to keep it all organized and straight and nice and neat. If it accomplishes what you need to do, by all means, go for it. I guess, as always, all things in moderation, or in other words...
I can teach you, but I won't be held responsible for what you do with the knowledge.
I really need to find another video clip to use for these kinds of warnings, but that one's just so perfect. Okay, so some limitations. I've already mentioned that GML does not currently support interfaces in object-oriented programming. For those of you who don't know, a programming interface is not like a graphical user interface, but an indication to the compiler that a class must implement a certain method. I won't get into the virtues of them here because they don't exist in GML. Something else you may wish to do in other languages is something like call the parent objects method, which might go something like super.method speak. This is also something that will not work in GML. There is no way to access from the Beagle class the Doggo's method speak. That doesn't exist. I'm pretty sure I've said this before. These are kinda, sorta, not really classes. Not real classes, at least in the sense that they are in things like C#. There is really not much of an actual relationship inside the computer between Beagle and Doggo and Animal. Everything that you set inside the constructor is just a variable containing a value, a number value, or a string value, or a function in this case. And when you override a method in a child objects constructor, it just replaces the value inside the inside method speak with a different function. If you wanted to, and this would be a terrible idea that you should do under pretty much no circumstances ever, you could just assign a value to method speak, and the game would work. Because again, this is just a variable which happens to contain a function which you can execute with the dot operator. So if I were to say Beagle equals new Beagle, Doggo equals new Doggo, and if I were to print out the value contained inside each of these, and this looks like something that you should not be allowed to do, but you can if you omit the parentheses, if you don't call it as a method, as an actual function. Let us print out the value of the others. And if I were to run the game, the Beagle and the Animal are going to spawn on top of each other. As you can see, the Animal's method speak is a function GML script anon animal GML object methods create 0466 animal GML object methods create 0. That was quite something to say out loud. Doggo's method speak is function GML script anon Doggo GML object methods create 0 1180 Doggo GML object methods create 0. Beautiful. And the value inside Beagle's method speak is 10. And if I were to run the game, you would get a woof and nothing else because Animal is the only one who's actually running their update method and receiving the keyboard event. Let's do that. So now when I hit the spacebar, it's gonna break because that is not useful. That is not useful. Oh, there. Oh, okay, I see. There's a problem with method speak in this code, specifically that it's a number instead of a function, and you're trying to execute a number, which is kind of not very useful. So let me get rid of that nonsense. Now, hopefully, you see how you can use inheritance in GML, how you can't use inheritance. Hopefully, you have a better idea of what a struct actually is. Like I said in the first video, it's really just a blob of data. Let's see, did I accidentally close that? Let me let me execute the actual step and draw methods for the other two things I created here. And just so that they're not like sitting on top of each other, let's space them out a little bit. Okay. Also, as you can see, the beagle is using the doggo's draw method because it inherits the draw method from the doggo. Or I should say, it had its draw method set in the doggo's constructor. Maybe if I were to be a little bit more correct about these things. So that's inheritance in GML. That is struct inheritance in GML. Have fun with that. I find it quite useful in some situations. I find it quite messy in others. Go out and have all the arguments you want with people on the internet over whether you should use inheritance never or whether you should use inheritance for literally everything. Realistically, in the real world, the answer is somewhere in the middle. What are game devs if not people who like to argue about what the best way to do things is? And also to complain about their tools. That's like the national pastime for game devs. Alright. Code for this. There's a fair amount of it this time, actually, since it builds on a bunch of other things. GitHub, video description. I'm going to commit that to master. Let's see, is there anything else? I don't think so. If you want to see this in practice, if you want to see structs used in practice, every Wednesday I've been uploading a series of videos on making a tower defense game in 3D in GameMaker Studio 2.3. And I do use a lot of these, I am making extensive use of structs. I haven't done much with inheritance yet, although there are a few things that I'd like to use it for. What else? There are a few more things that I'd like to talk about when it comes to GameMaker Studio 2.3, although I think I'm finally getting down to the end of the new editions, at least code-wise. And that's it, I think. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. I have a Patreon for these GameMaker videos, so if you want to join the fun, if you're feeling generous, there's a link to those in all the usual places. I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Edward Holt, Indie Punch, and Zenith for supporting these videos. If you want your name in the credits and to force me to pronounce them out loud at the end of every video, head over to the Patreon page in the video description and join the fun.